Intel released the Arc A750 and A770 dedicated graphic cards in late 2022 with mixed performance results and various driver issues. It was hard to recommend then, but several driver updates have resolved most issues and it now offers a compelling value option. Today I'll be running it in a handful of games at 1440p resolution on the Arc A750 to show what kind of performance you can expect from this card. I will be testing with an i5-11400 and 16GB of dual-channel DDR4 at 3200MHz, but at PCI Express Gen 3 speeds. This card does support Gen 4, but it shouldn't impact performance too much. Resizable bar is enabled and a bit of a must with Arc GPUs. Games can stutter and make them unplayable without it. If you are considering an Intel graphics card, ensure your motherboard supports resizable bar, otherwise I would highly recommend avoiding. The performance figures are from testing with the latest drivers, released 25th of April. I initially did the benchmarks on previous month's drivers, however Intel released the current ones, so I redid the benchmarks but didn't recapture them, more on that shortly. The video is also a downscaled 1440p to 1080p image because that's the maximum resolution my capture card can do. Okay, let's start the games. Doom Eternal is running poorly here. I found the reason being was due to the mirroring of the video output, one to the monitor and one to the capture card. When I disconnect the capture card and restart the PC, performance increased remarkably as shown by the figures. So when the new drivers were released, I decided to just benchmark with a single display for a more accurate typical use case and reuse the old game captures since I wouldn't be able to get a perfect capture anyway. Just focusing on the test result figures, it runs very well when outputting to a single display. High FPS on the highest ultra nightmare settings. Decent 1% lows and okay 0.1% lows. It didn't feel bad to play at all. Arc offers a very good experience in this game, at least when you connect to a single monitor. Shadow of the Tomb Raider runs well at 1440p on the highest graphics preset minus motion blur and depth of field, comfortably above 60 FPS in this busier area of the game. Figures are from the benchmarks on the latest drivers. Decent numbers across all figures, no complaints from me. I forgot to test, but this is one of the few games that has Intel Xe super sampling upscaling method. Not sure how it compares to AMD's FSR or Nvidia's DLSS, but it's good to see the option here. Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition does very well in my opinion. The footage is showing the Ultra preset with normal ray tracing, that's the lowest you can choose, and hybrid reflections. We get a very solid experience, averaging over 90 FPS in the first level of the game. After updating the drivers, I decided I would retry with the Extreme preset, that's the highest, with the same ray tracing settings, and we were still above 60 FPS, so a solid result. I've put both results on screen just for comparison's sake. Far Cry 6 is also performing great at maxed out settings, minus the extended features, which includes ray tracing. I did try with them on and it brought the frame rate to around 60 FPS in the benchmark, and while playable, it's desirable to be above this since you will feel the dips harder without a bit of a buffer. Also, I don't think ray tracing does much for this title, so I would leave it off unless you have lots of performance headroom. Resident Evil 4 Remake, or the Chainsaw demo to be exact, runs great on the Arc. I've set it to prioritize graphics preset with a few tweaks to my preference, which were motion blur, depth of field, and lens distortion all disabled, none of which should really impact performance. The first time starting, it had some bad stutter for about the first minute, but after that it was all smoothed out. I'm guessing some caching was happening. The benchmark figures are taken after the stuttering had finished, otherwise the 0.1% lows would have been much worse. The first time testing, I had noticed frame rate drops near the end of the benchmark and had noticed very high VRAM usage. I restarted the whole system and redid the test, and it was fine the second time through. Bit of an odd behavior. It might have been due to adjusting settings beforehand, but I'm not sure. It may require dropping the textures from 2GB to 1GB in the full game due to VRAM limitations, but I won't be able to test that. The most problematic game I found was Deathloop. To be fair, the game did give a warning that Intel graphics aren't officially supported. While in the game the frame rate was all over the place, it could easily fluctuate from above 100 FPS to less than 60. To maintain an above 60 FPS at 1440p at all times, I had to use the medium preset, which is what the footage is showing. However, I think the best way to run it would be on the high preset with adaptive resolution FSR 2.0 to the balance preset. This will keep the frame rate above 60 FPS during the harder to render parts while allowing for nicer graphics. I would advise a frame rate lock to avoid the large fluctuations in frame rates, which can be a bit jarring. I have a guess that it's the VRAM that is impacting performance. My experience with this game is that it is very memory hungry. It would be interesting to see if a 16GB Arc A750 fares much better, but this does lead to a concern with this 8GB card. Does it have enough VRAM going forward? Games are trending towards becoming more memory hungry, and we can see that in new release titles. What this means for this card and other 8GB cards is that you'll have to dial back graphics settings. It won't make them unusable, but it will mean sacrificing some visuals. How much so will depend on the game. You should be aware of this if considering any 8GB of VRAM card. However, at the price point these are available, at least where I live, it may be worth settling for an A750 knowing what it might mean in future titles. Overall, I would say this card offers compelling value for 1440p gaming. In Australia, it can be had for under 400 Australian dollars for the reference model or 350 for the ASRock model. I wouldn't be able to get a similar performing card brand new from either Nvidia or AMD at this price point. This might not be the case where you live, so best to shop around to find the best value card. There are also lots of second-hand GPUs which offer better performance around the same price point, but of course being used come with a degree of risk. So that's the Intel Arc A750 and my thoughts on it. If you'd like to share yours, leave a comment, and thanks for watching.